Have you ever gone through so much pain that you started believing God abandoned you? Maybe you lost people you loved. Maybe you prayed and nothing changed. Maybe your heart became so exhausted that every disappointment started feeling like a spiritual attack. And somewhere in the middle of your suffering, you began to fear that something was wrong with you spiritually. You thought, what if I'm cursed? What if God is punishing me? What if the devil is destroying my life? But what if not every storm in your life came from the devil? What if some wounds came from being human in a broken world? And what if God is not standing against you in your pain, but sitting beside you in it? There is a dangerous misunderstanding many people carry in silence. They believe every heartbreak is spiritual warfare. Every delay is a curse. Every failure is demonic oppression. So instead of healing emotionally, they stay trapped, spiritually confused. And because of that confusion, they become afraid of life itself. They cannot grieve normally. They cannot process pain honestly. They cannot admit exhaustion without feeling guilty. Everything becomes, the devil is after me. But sometimes, life itself breaks people. Not because God hates them, not because demons are winning, but because human beings are fragile. And this truth changes everything. Some people are not spiritually attacked. They are emotionally drowning. And there is a difference. Because emotional drowning does not always look dramatic on the outside. Sometimes it looks like smiling in public while silently collapsing in private. Sometimes it looks like being physically present, but emotionally exhausted. Sometimes it looks like constantly praying for strength while secretly wondering how much more pain a human heart can carry. They are carrying years of rejection nobody helped them process. Rejection from childhood, rejection from relationships, rejection from people they trusted, rejection that quietly taught them they were unwanted. And over time, those wounds began speaking louder than truth. Now, every closed door feels personal. Every silence feels intentional. Every disappointment feels spiritual. They are carrying years of disappointment they never healed from. Prayers that seemed unanswered, dreams that fell apart, relationships that ended suddenly. Moments they begged God to change, but nothing happened. And after enough heartbreak, the soul becomes tired. Not rebellious, just tired. Tired of surviving emotionally while pretending spiritually, tired of trying to stay hopeful, tired of trying to stay faithful, tired of trying to convince everyone they are okay. Some people have become experts at looking strong while internally breaking apart, and eventually the mind becomes overwhelmed. Fear increases, not because they are weak, but because constant pain changes the way people think. Anxiety grows. Now they overanalyze everything. Every setback feels like a warning. Every hardship feels like punishment. Overthinking takes over. They begin searching for hidden meanings in every painful situation. What did I do wrong? Why does my life feel heavy? Why do I feel abandoned? Is God angry with me? And slowly, pain starts becoming spiritualized. Every bad event suddenly feels supernatural. A failed relationship becomes, the enemy stole my destiny. Emotional burnout becomes, I'm spiritually cursed. Trauma becomes, God left me. And this is where confusion becomes dangerous. Because when people do not understand emotional suffering, they start fighting themselves spiritually. Instead of healing, they panic. Instead of resting, they become afraid. Instead of grieving honestly, they feel guilty for hurting. But sometimes your soul is not under attack. Sometimes your heart is wounded. Sometimes your mind is exhausted. Sometimes your emotions are overwhelmed. Sometimes your spirit is carrying pain your body never learned how to release. And wounded people often interpret pain through fear, especially when they have suffered for too long in silence, because pain has a way of distorting perception. A tired mind can mistake exhaustion for abandonment. A wounded heart can mistake silence for rejection. And a suffering soul can begin to believe that God has disappeared when He is actually closest in the moments of brokenness. You know what many people never admit? Sometimes they are not hearing demons. They are hearing exhaustion. Exhaustion from carrying emotional pain for too many years without rest. Exhaustion from always being strong for everyone else. Exhaustion from silently surviving battles nobody ever noticed. And after a while, a tired mind can begin to sound like fear. Sometimes what feels like spiritual darkness is years of emotional neglect catching up. Pain that was ignored, grief that was buried, tears that were never released, emotions that were pushed down for survival. Because many people were taught how to function, but never taught how to heal. So they learned to suppress pain instead of processing it. They learned how to smile while hurting, how to pray while emotionally numb, how to keep going while internally collapsing. And eventually, the soul begins to feel heavy. Some people grew up in environments where they never felt safe. Homes filled with tension, homes where love felt conditional, homes where emotions were ignored, homes where vulnerability was treated like weakness. Some grew up constantly criticized, constantly misunderstood, constantly trying to earn love they should have received freely. Others experienced betrayal so early in life that trust became difficult even with God. They never truly felt emotionally seen. Nobody asked if they were okay. Nobody noticed their silent sadness. Nobody recognized how deeply certain experiences wounded them. So they learned to suffer quietly. And when people suffer quietly for too long, their inner world becomes filled with fear. Now, every hardship feels personal. Every delay feels intentional. Every disappointment feels targeted. Every painful season feels like proof that something is spiritually wrong with them. Every silence from God feels like rejection, not because God abandoned them, but because pain has distorted the way they interpret silence, and every closed door feels like punishment. So slowly, they stop feeling safe in life itself. They become terrified of uncertainty, terrified of loss, terrified of another disappointment, terrified of hoping too much. And when fear grows unchecked, people begin searching desperately for explanations. They fast harder, not from peace, but from panic. They pray louder, not always from faith, but from fear that something terrible is happening spiritually. They search for hidden enemies, searching for curses, searching for spiritual attacks, searching for invisible reasons behind every painful experience, because pain always wants an explanation. But deep inside, their soul is simply crying for rest, not performance, not pressure, not more fear. Rest. Rest from overthinking, rest from emotional survival mode, rest from carrying invisible wounds alone. Their soul is crying for healing. Healing from abandonment, healing from disappointment, healing from years of pretending to be okay. Their soul is crying for peace. The kind of peace that reminds a person they are not cursed simply because they are hurting. Because not every battle is spiritual warfare. Some battles are grief. The grief of losing people, the grief of losing dreams, the grief of becoming emotionally exhausted from life itself. Some battles are trauma, painful experiences that changed how a person thinks, trusts, and feels safe in the world. And some battles are emotional collapse after years of carrying too much alone. Years of pressure, years of silent suffering, years of trying to stay faithful while emotionally breaking apart inside. And the tragedy is this: many hurting people are trying to cast out demons, when what they truly need is healing, honesty, rest, and the gentle restoration of the soul. Even in the Bible, not every suffering was caused by demons. And this is important to understand because many people have spent years interpreting every painful experience through fear instead of wisdom. Some suffering came from betrayal. Joseph was betrayed by his own brothers. David was betrayed by people close to him. Jesus himself was betrayed by someone he loved. Not every wound was spiritual attack. Some wounds came from broken human choices. Some suffering came from human decisions, decisions people made selfishly. Decisions that hurt others deeply, decisions that created emotional scars lasting for years. And sometimes people carry the pain of what others did to them while believing God caused it. Some suffering came from loss, loss of loved ones, loss of relationships, loss of opportunities, loss of seasons that never returned. Because grief is part of being human, And grief does not mean God abandoned you. Some suffering came from living in a broken world, a world filled with disappointment, a world where people fail each other, a world where hearts break, a world where pain exists even among faithful people. And understanding this truth removes unnecessary fear from the soul. Because not every hardship is evidence of spiritual defeat. Sometimes it is simply evidence that human beings experience pain. Jesus himself wept, and that detail matters deeply, because Jesus was perfect. Yet he still experienced sorrow, still experienced grief, still experienced emotional pain, not because he lacked faith, not because he was spiritually weak, but because pain is real. Pain is part of the human experience. Even the strongest people can become emotionally tired. Even faithful people can grieve deeply. Even spiritual people can feel overwhelmed sometimes. And one of the most healing truths you can ever understand is this: God does not shame human pain. He does not mock broken hearts. He does not condemn exhausted souls. He does not reject people for struggling emotionally. God understands it. He understands heartbreak. The heartbreak of being disappointed by people you trusted. The heartbreak of praying for things that never happened. The heartbreak of carrying invisible pain nobody sees. He understands loneliness. The loneliness of suffering silently. The loneliness of feeling emotionally disconnected. The loneliness of smiling around people while internally hurting. He understands exhaustion. Not just physical exhaustion, but soul exhaustion. The kind of exhaustion that comes from carrying emotional burdens for too long. The kind of exhaustion where even simple things begin to feel heavy. And this is where many people misunderstand God. They think God is angry with them for struggling. But sometimes God is not trying to expose a demon. Sometimes he is trying to heal a wound caused by rejection, a wound caused by trauma. A wound caused by years of emotional neglect. A wound caused by silently surviving pain nobody noticed. Because God is not only concerned with spiritual bondage, he also cares about emotional restoration. He cares about the condition of the heart. And healing begins when you stop calling every emotional struggle a spiritual failure. Healing begins when you stop condemning yourself for being human, when you stop feeling guilty for grieving, when you stop feeling ashamed for being emotionally tired, when you stop interpreting every painful season as divine punishment. Because awareness changes everything. Awareness helps you stop fighting yourself. It helps you recognize the difference between spiritual warfare and emotional suffering. And sometimes the breakthrough is not found in becoming more afraid, but in finally understanding that God's presence still remains even in ordinary human pain. Not every storm means God left. Sometimes he is closest in the storm, quietly healing parts of you that pain tried to destroy. The enemy wants people trapped in fear, because fear distorts perception. Fear makes people panic instead of understand. Fear makes people react instead of heal. Fear makes people interpret every painful experience through spiritual terror. And when fear controls the mind, people stop listening clearly. They stop hearing truth, stop hearing wisdom, stop hearing the quiet voice of peace, because fear is loud. Fear convinces people that every hardship means destruction, every delay means punishment, every painful season means God has left them. And slowly, they begin living in constant spiritual anxiety. They overanalyze everything. They become emotionally restless. They struggle to feel safe even in ordinary life. Because fearful people are always preparing for disaster. They stop resting. Even when their body is exhausted, even when their emotions are overwhelmed, even when their soul desperately needs peace, they feel guilty for slowing down. So they keep fighting invisible battles while ignoring the visible pain inside them. They stop healing. Not because healing is impossible, but because fear keeps them trapped in survival mode. And survival mode makes it difficult to process grief honestly, difficult to acknowledge emotional pain, difficult to admit exhaustion, difficult to sit quietly with the truth of what they are feeling. So instead of healing, they become obsessed with surviving spiritually while ignoring their emotional condition. They focus only on fighting darkness while neglecting the wounds inside their own heart. But God wants truth, not panic, not confusion, not spiritual paranoia. Truth. Because truth brings balance. Truth helps people stop living in extremes. It helps them understand that not every painful experience is demonic oppression, and not every emotional struggle means spiritual weakness. Yes, spiritual warfare exists. There are real spiritual battles, real temptations, real moments where darkness tries to influence fear, confusion, and destruction. But emotional suffering exists too. Human exhaustion exists. Trauma exists. Grief exists. Mental and emotional burnout exist. And wisdom is knowing the difference. Wisdom is understanding what requires spiritual resistance and what requires emotional healing. Because confusing the two can keep people trapped unnecessarily. Not every storm is an attack. Some storms are part of life, part of being human in an imperfect world. Some storms reveal unhealed pain. Pain people buried instead of processed. Pain hidden behind years of pretending to be okay. And eventually, life exposes what the soul has been silently carrying. Some storms expose emotional exhaustion, the exhaustion of constantly giving while never recovering, the exhaustion of surviving without resting, the exhaustion of carrying responsibilities, grief, fear, and disappointment for too long. And sometimes the breakdown is not spiritual defeat, but emotional overload. Some storms are simply seasons that shape the soul, seasons that teach humility, seasons that deepen compassion, seasons that reveal how fragile human beings truly are. Because growth is not always comfortable. Sometimes growth happens through loss, through waiting, through uncertainty, through moments where people are forced to confront their inner pain honestly. And through all of it, God remains present, even when emotions feel unstable, even when prayers feel quiet, even when life feels heavy. God remains present, not accusing you, not standing over your pain with condemnation, not cursing you, not secretly plotting your destruction because you are emotionally struggling, not abandoning you, even when you feel weak, even when you feel confused, even when you feel exhausted from life itself. He remains near, healing you, healing the parts of you fear tried to damage, healing the parts of you trauma tried to harden, healing the parts of you pain tried to silence, slowly. Because deep healing is rarely instant, patiently. Because God understands how long some wounds have been carried, lovingly, not with shame, not with cruelty, not with rejection, but with the kind of mercy that reminds broken people they do not have to fear their humanity in order to be loved by God. Maybe the reason you feel broken is not because demons destroyed your life. Maybe life hurt you deeply, and you never gave yourself permission to heal. Maybe you spent so many years trying to survive that you never stopped long enough to acknowledge how much pain you were actually carrying. Because many people know how to keep functioning, but do not know how to recover emotionally. So they continue living with invisible wounds, wounds hidden behind smiles, wounds hidden behind prayer, wounds hidden behind strength. And after a while, the soul becomes exhausted from pretending. Maybe your soul has been carrying silent grief for years, grief from things you lost but never fully processed, grief from prayers that felt unanswered, grief from relationships that changed you painfully, grief from disappointments you told yourself to just move on from. But unprocessed pain does not disappear. It settles quietly inside the heart. And over time, that hidden pain can begin affecting the way you think, feel, trust, and even pray. Maybe you've been surviving emotionally while pretending spiritually, pretending to be strong because you thought weakness meant failure, pretending to be okay because you feared judgment, pretending to have faith while secretly feeling emotionally overwhelmed. And eventually, the pressure of pretending becomes heavier than the pain itself. Because human beings were never created to carry emotional suffering alone forever. And today, God is not asking you to be stronger. He's not asking you to hide your emotions better, not asking you to suppress your tears, not asking you to act spiritually powerful while internally breaking apart. He is asking you to be honest, honest about the pain, the pain you keep minimizing, the pain you keep burying, the pain you never allowed yourself to fully acknowledge. Honest about the exhaustion of constantly surviving, the exhaustion of always carrying everyone else emotionally, the exhaustion of trying to stay hopeful while feeling drained inside. Honest about the fear of failing, fear of losing more, fear that God abandoned you, fear that your suffering means something is wrong with you spiritually. Because healing starts where pretending ends. Healing begins when truth enters the soul. When you stop hiding behind spiritual performance, when you stop condemning yourself for hurting, when you stop confusing emotional pain with spiritual failure, and God can heal wounds that life created. Not only spiritual wounds, but emotional wounds too. Wounds created by rejection, by betrayal, by abandonment, by disappointment, by years of silently carrying burdens nobody understood. He can restore exhausted minds tired from anxiety, tired from fear, tired from overthinking every painful situation. He can comfort grieving hearts carrying silent sorrow, hearts mourning losses nobody talks about, hearts that became emotionally numb after too much pain. He can strengthen tired souls that still love God but no longer know how to keep carrying the weight of life alone. Because God does not only care about spiritual survival, He cares about wholeness, He cares about peace, about restoration, about healing the hidden places inside people that suffering damaged quietly over time. Not every broken place in you is evil. And this is something many people desperately need to hear. Not every struggle means demons. Not every emotional battle means spiritual corruption. Not every moment of weakness means God has rejected you. Some parts of you are simply hurting from life, hurting from loss, hurting from carrying too much for too long. And hurting people need compassion, not condemnation. They need truth without shame, healing without fear, grace without judgment. Because sometimes the greatest miracle is not dramatic deliverance. Sometimes the greatest miracle is finally allowing yourself to heal. So the next time life becomes heavy, do not immediately assume heaven is against you. Do not automatically believe your pain means God abandoned you. Because sometimes suffering is not punishment. Sometimes it is the painful reality of being human in a broken world. Do not call yourself cursed because you are tired. Exhaustion does not mean God rejected you. Sometimes the mind becomes overwhelmed after carrying too much for too long. Sometimes the heart becomes weary after years of disappointment, pressure, grief, and silent emotional battles. That does not make you cursed. It makes you human. Do not call yourself spiritually weak because you are grieving. Grief is not weakness. Tears are not weakness. Emotional pain is not weakness. Needing rest is not weakness. Even faithful people grieve. Even strong people become emotionally exhausted sometimes. And God does not shame people for hurting. Do not mistake emotional pain for divine rejection. Because pain can distort perception. Pain can make silence feel like abandonment. Pain can make delays feel personal. Pain can make exhausted souls believe they are spiritually failing, when in reality they are simply emotionally overwhelmed. Sometimes the devil didn't attack you. Life just broke you. Life broke you through disappointment, through betrayal, through pressure, through loss, through carrying burdens nobody else could see. And sometimes the damage happened slowly, quietly, until one day you realized you were emotionally tired in ways you could no longer hide. But even then, God is still able to rebuild what pain destroyed. He can rebuild peace inside anxious minds, rebuild hope inside disappointed hearts, rebuild strength inside exhausted souls. Because God specializes in restoration, not only spiritual restoration, but emotional restoration too. He restores the parts of people that suffering tried to harden, the parts that became fearful, the parts that became hopeless, the parts that became emotionally numb after too much pain. And maybe your greatest spiritual breakthrough will not come from fighting harder, not from becoming more afraid, not from constantly searching for hidden enemies, not from living in spiritual panic. Maybe your greatest breakthrough will come from finally slowing down, long enough to heal honestly. From finally admitting you are tired, finally confronting the grief you buried, finally allowing God into the emotional places you kept hiding. Because healing requires honesty. And sometimes the strongest thing a person can do spiritually is stop pretending they are okay. Because God is not only the God of spiritual warfare, He is also the God of restoration, the God who stays with broken people, the God who comforts exhausted souls, the God who heals wounds created by life itself. And if life has broken something inside you, that does not mean your story is over. Because healing is still possible, peace is still possible, restoration is still possible, and even in your pain, God is still present.